One of the things that characterizes living beings is the reaction to external and internal stimuli. For apparently simple animals such as the invertebrates, these stimuli are generally physical and chemical factors, such as the light or the temperature of the water. Moving up the evolutionary scale, the existence of these powerful calls of nature can clearly be seen in examples such as the salmon swimming back up the rivers in which they were born. Or the predators that year after year gather along the riverbanks ready to seize the eagerly awaited salmon as they arrive from the sea like a gift for their stomachs. The fact is, all the survivors of the planet Earth respond to calls like these, which incite them to make great efforts in the promise of even greater rewards. No obstacle can then halt those who feel the calls from within. Biologists try to explain these phenomena and often manage it with expressions such as the migratory call, the reproductive impulse, or hormonal changes. But some of these behaviors resist full explanation in strictly scientific terms, despite the fact that they often occur before our very eyes. Human beings go one step further, adding to their purely biological calls others which derive from their eternal search for explanations, the call of the beyond, the longing to know what happens after death. We are going to listen to the echoes of this strange urge. Human beings' dependence on the natural environment is inherited. There are rules genetically engraved in our minds which determine our preference for particular landscapes. Through mechanisms such as perception, human nature prefers certain environments to others, and this fact affects our behavior more than we might think. For example, we prefer to sleep at a certain height, and so in our houses, the bedrooms are always on the upper floor. It is a custom which we acquired when, as pre-hominid simians, we made nests up in the trees to sleep safe from predators. We feel reassured by a clear horizon with scattered vegetation and some kind of watercourse. Looking at the sea relaxes us, and we find dense forests disturbing. In other words, we prefer something similar to the savanna on which our species evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. We don't like darkness and feel anxious when we are below very high mountains. None of this is chance. Everything responds to the call from within, the mindset of the Neanderthal we still carry inside us. But we also feel other calls from beyond. The human mind is incapable of remaining still and seeks to discover what is the true essence of which we are made. The different religions and beliefs try to explain this, or even declare that there is nothing after death. But everyone agrees that there are concepts such as ethics, hate, and compassion, which resist the biological explanations until now used by science. So where do they come from? The search for identity, the real me, would seem to be a particularly human characteristic, and thousands of people have dedicated and continue to dedicate their lives to it, though none have as yet come up with an explanation capable of convincing everyone. Though we don't have the answer, no one can deny that it is a question which constantly preoccupies us, and, as far as we know, is something which distinguishes us from all other animals. This is the Ivory Coast. Here we can see a particularly spectacular example of this human obsession with transcendence. This colossal religious work is a replica of the Vatican in the middle of the African jungle. Almost 2,000 workers took 3 years to build it. It is the Basilica of Yamoussoukro. 128 Doric columns, each one 30 meters high, and 7 hectares of marble brought from Italy and Spain were the work which the first president of the Ivory Coast, Félix Houphouët-Boigny, wanted to dedicate to the Christian God. A cross of solid gold weighing 50 kilos presides over the sumptuous interior of the basilica, surrounded by 7,400 square meters of stained glass windows. In one of them, the ex-president had himself portrayed, so there could be no doubt about his devotion. There is seating space for 7,000 people, but it is always empty. The majority of the people of the Ivory Coast worship other gods. Despite this, the president spent almost his entire fortune on the construction of this temple, which he then presented to the Vatican, its current owner. He, without a doubt, was very sure of the call of heaven. As well as our relations with the landscape, we human beings couldn't ignore the presence of all the other living creatures that have accompanied us on the long evolutionary path. The majority of peoples have invested animals with a halo of mystery and superstition, and that is particularly true of hunting peoples. Human beings cannot resist this call from within. We need to see more than a simple eagle. We look for a message in their presence, in their voice, and in their majestic flight. Humanity in reality seeks to represent itself in the cosmic visions our cultural condition forces us to create. Evil, death, and illness are different problems which we cannot experience without seeking an explanation around us or inside ourselves. In the long history of thought and imagination, both mythical, aesthetic, and religious, we have used the other animals as vehicles in our search. Curiously, in many parts of the world, such as here in the Sahara Desert in Africa, the representations of these animals which human beings in the past adopted as totems have survived the animals themselves. In this region, there are no longer giraffes or zebras like the ones depicted here, painted by man a long time ago. From the time we lost respect for what we previously believed to be the spirits of the animals, and until very recently, humanity's overwhelming preoccupation was with itself. Wars, powers, and conquests first, and technology and development later, meant that, save rare exceptions, we forgot about our fellow survivors of other species. We only remembered them in order to exterminate them from the majority of the planet. In the 21st century, certain animals only remain in the wild in a few remote corners of the world. But in the last century, man heard a new call from within. Just when it seemed that all the wild animals were going to disappear forever, around the world voices were raised, proclaiming their right to live. The new totems had been born, now called species in danger of extinction. A new caste of animal worshippers with more power than ever are ready to give everything for their new gods. Ecology generates its social arm, ecologism, and once again new legions of people travel to the farthest corners of the world to observe their new idols. Ecological tourism generates income, and so in many places manages to halt the extermination of entire animal species. But there are loves that kill. Human beings would seem to carry their curse with them, even when they go with good intentions. The paths of the visitors and those of the wild animals are beginning to cross a little too often. In addition, we human beings refuse to give up our comforts and take our vehicles with us right to the end, with all the consequent effects. Many animals are unable to assimilate such rapid changes. It was easier for them to understand a hunter with his gun than these strange beings that smilingly observe them and come too close. These enormous buffaloes do not understand why these shiny beasts do not get out of their way like all the other animals do. The old totem seems out of his place in his own home, and he's not the only one. But it's not only tourism. In all countries with some wildlife, the human population has tripled, and previously uncultivated lands are colonized to the detriment of wild areas. The encounters with the local population are thus more frequent, and for one of the two sides in these encounters, the result is not always positive. Perhaps this new call of nature of modern society is something which will have to be controlled after all. The attraction between animals and people has many faces with very different consequences. Here in Australia, as in many other parts of the world, roads now reach everywhere, and for an animal a road is simply a strange black river, which it is necessary to cross, all too frequently. But at night, the dazzling lights of the vehicles attract the gaze of the kangaroos, and they become mesmerized. A fatal attraction. And the sacred kangaroo of the Aborigines ends up in the ditch. But there are some animals whose encounters with humans are not always fortuitous or involuntary. In this Australian bay, the bottlenose dolphins deliberately approach the coast in order to seek out an encounter with their worst enemy. But this time they come in peace. This is a very strange phenomenon for which biologists can find no explanation. These completely wild dolphins come here with the only apparent intention of observing human beings, and of course are also observed by them. If we consider that people kill dolphins all around the world and that these cetaceans are among the most intelligent of animals, this friendly attitude is difficult to understand. Many of them even bring their young with them. Cetaceans in general, and dolphins in particular, have often interacted with man in ways which confound conventional zoological explanations. They seem to be particularly fond of children, and it has been proven that contact with dolphins can have enormous therapeutic benefits for children with mental or communication problems. Is there something special between man and dolphins? There would seem to be some mutual attraction between the two most intelligent evolutionary branches on our planet. Many people have seen dolphins approach ships and accompany them for a while, but very few have been satisfied with the simplistic explanation that they're merely playing. They're not just playing, there's something more. They're observing us. Pilot whales are close relatives of the dolphins and share with them what we could describe as the call of man. They are gentle animals despite measuring 8 meters in length, and their attitude to the presence of human beings around them is disconcerting. They look at us and even talk to us in their language of whistles. Up to now, we have not been able to understand what they are trying to say to us, but neither they nor their more aggressive relative, the orcas, have ever attacked a human being in the wild, despite frequent provocation by man. Perhaps someday we will decipher all these strange calls which lead both humans and other animals to do things with no apparent explanation. Or perhaps the iconography was wrong, and the angels do not have wings after all, but rather fins.